Here in front of us is a first generation 2003 Toyota Tacoma SR5. This Tacoma is equipped with a 2.7 liter 3RZ FE engine with a 5-speed manual transmission behind it. This truck in particular is a 4-wheel drive, but if yours is a 2-wheel drive, then this how-to will be applicable to you as well. This will also apply for the 1996 to 2000 Toyota 4Runner if that's what you have. And if you're not in the US, this can also apply to other select vehicles like the Toyota Helix and other cars. Before we get started with the video, I just want to mention that the master mechanic has been in the automotive field for over 25 years working on cars just like this one, as well as diesels, doing things from engines, transmission swaps, rear end differentials, all suspension components, braking systems, and much more. So if any of you live in the San Diego area, feel free to message us on Instagram or Facebook, or you could also email us. Let us know what problem you're having with your vehicle and we can schedule you in to get it fixed. Let's get this Tacoma pulled into the shop and let's get started.
So we are going to be doing a clutch on this truck. This thing is completely shot, barely moves the vehicle. So I'm gonna start with popping the hood. We got a secondary latch right here in the grill. Get it up, get it propped up. Have ourselves a 4-cylinder. Now we're gonna go to inside the vehicle. We're gonna start inside. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull the shifters up here. So there's a screw here in the back and a screw in the front. Then we're gonna unscrew the shifter knobs. Take off the gear shifter, take off the transfer case shifter knob. And we're gonna remove the chargers here for all of our accessories. We'll take our screw out of the front. And the same on this side. And we're gonna pop the little boot cover here. So this is slid back in here a little bit, so we gotta pop it forward, finagle it a little. It pops around there. So now we can take our whole cover off, get to our shifters here. So now we have the rubber boots. We have the screws here. Both sides we're gonna take up. And we take up our little boot cover. What seals it so you don't get all the air noise when you're driving. And we get to our shifters. So now we pop this rubber boot up here. And then we have this little retainer here. See it's spring loaded, you can push it down. So as it's pushed down, it needs to rotate counterclockwise. And see how it pops up here? Then now it's unlocked, you can pull it out of the transmission. And this has transmission fluid on it. I normally set it on the mat here on the floor, but I put some rags down. So let me grab a rag so I can set it on the floor here. So now I'll take my shifter, make sure it's not gonna drip or do anything on the carpet. We're gonna set that over there. Then we're gonna do the same with the transfer case shifter here. So we have the rubber boot on it. Pop the rubber boot up. This one's a little bit different. It has a spring clip in here. So you kind of want to push down on it a little bit, make sure it's not binding. Just pop that out. It's like a C-clip kind of. Just work it around like so. We get it all out. Same deal. Give it a little wiggle. This will come up. Same thing. Make sure you're not going to drip, make a mess. Set it over here on our towels. So now we have all the shifters out of the way. So when we drop the tranny, it can slide back and we don't have anything sticking up to hit the floor to stop us from getting the tranny out. So now we're gonna get the vehicle lifted up, get underneath. So we have the truck in the air, and I just wanna show really quick before we get started, is yes, it's on a rack, but you can do this whole entire job on the ground with jacks and jack stands. So you just jack on the frame here and just put a jack stand where the lift is at, where the arm is. So you have a jack stand here. Then you'd wanna have a jack stand back here. So you could just jack here in the middle of the frame with a floor jack, get it up, jack stand it, rear, jack stand it front. Both sides, it's best if it's level. You can do all this on the ground. We're gonna be using air tools, but you could do the same thing all by hand. So don't get intimidated or think you can't do it because we have a rack and we're using air tools. You can still do it in your driveway or in your garage. Somewhere level, you don't really wanna be in a driveway at a slant, but garage, somewhere level, you can do it at home, no problem. So we're gonna start with this. We're gonna remove the drive lines. First, I'm gonna take out the rear drive line. I'm gonna leave the center support bolts in it to hold the drive line in place. These are 14 millimeter. The whole drive line is 14 millimeter. And it has the nuts and the washers. The rear has a nut and needs to be held. So same deal, it's a 14 millimeter. And you can see that somebody has been in this before because it's supposed to have a washer on the bolt side and the nut has a washer on it. And see this one here is missing the washer. So we're gonna have to replace that. So keep an eye on that. It's supposed to have a washer on the bolt side there. So there's no studs on here, but it has the slider, the flex shaft. So I want to pop this off of here first. So I'm just going to use a flathead screwdriver. You can come on the edge of the cap right here. You can see there's a little bit of a gap. Pop it loose so you're not fighting it when you get the carrier off. Need a little bit bigger of a screwdriver. I'm gonna come in here with a pry bar. We're gonna get this guy, there it goes. You gotta hold on to it though, because it'll come flying down on you. So the front of it has the studs on the output of the transfer case. So that's not gonna flop down on you. Now we're gonna come in here and do the carrier bearing. So it's 214, so we gotta hold the drive line up. And now we have the leverage of the drive line to break it loose up here. So we come down, give it a little pop, breaks it loose, Might wiggle it a little bit, get it off the studs. Take the drive line, we'll just set it in the back here out of the way. Now we're gonna take the front drive line off. It's the same deal. They have 14 nuts here on the transfer case side, and then the front's gonna have a bolt and a nut that needs to be held. The rear are stud, they got like a knurl, they're pressed into the flange here, so you don't have to hold on the back. Being that we have the cross member here in the way, I'm gonna use an extension, so I go over on the other side of it. Then there's a washer, so get the nut and the washer. So then on the front here, I'm gonna have to, I can use the same extension to get away from the sway bar here, get back far enough. Sometimes it'll spin it fast enough with the impact that you don't have to use a wrench. This is not the case, so we got to use a wrench on the front here. I like to use the box side of the wrench because it'll hold the nut when it comes loose. If you use the opening, it could fall, but if you use the box and it works out right, it'll catch. So when you come out, see, the wrench holds the nut for you. So this is the same as the rear. So it has a bolt, but it's supposed to have a washer on the bolt. So make sure you keep an eye on that going back together. And we're gonna do the same thing. This is gonna be, I'm just gonna use the pry bar. We're gonna come in and pry it off with the pinion. Same thing, it's got a little notch. Gotta watch these power steering lines here. So try to come in a way that you're not gonna hit them. There we go. And the same thing, the front of it has the slip yoke drive line, so we're going to push the slip yoke back. And I like to come above the pinion, so then I have enough room back here to get off the stud. So this, because the cross member's still in here, I can't drop the drive line down to get leverage to pop it off of here. So I got to use a pry bar, come in and pry it off of these studs. So then it's not going to, fall on you. So I'm just going to pry it, get it broke loose. Now I can bring the drive line above the pinion, and I can slide it off. And it's kind of do a little back and forth, and I can slide it out the back here. So now after getting the drive lines out, I like to go around the transmission and get all the electrical off of it. So sometimes it's easier just to take the nut or the bolt off of it that holds the bracket for the harness. So I'm just gonna take these bolts out. It's easier than trying to deal with the locking clips on the harness. So first I'm gonna unplug this. It's got a little locking tab on top here. So we come back here, same deal, it's got a locking tab on top, unplug it. So this stays, this is part of the vehicle harness, and then this you don't have to worry about unbolting because it goes back. This will stay on the transfer case, so you don't have to worry about that. So then we'll come around to the back side. This is the output vehicle speed, so unplug that, so we get the lock here on top. Give a little wiggle, and we have another tab here. So these are a little bit different. These are like an alligator clip, so it's definitely easier just to take the bolt out. So this here is our backup lights. It's our backup switch. It has a little harness to it. So we're just gonna unplug it right here at the vehicle harness. This part of it stays on the transmission. And then this one has a little tab up here. So it has this little line up here. It's like a little vacuum line, a little rubber line that this goes around. So we gotta make sure to get this out from being tangled around this rubber line before you drop the tranny down, because we don't wanna be tugging on any of this. If that bracket gets to be a pain, it won't go through there. You can give this little alligator clip a little squeeze. So I'm just gonna use a little needle nose. We're gonna squeeze a little alligator clip here, get our bracket off. So now I'll have more room. Get this harness around this little rubber line up here. So now we have our vehicle harness free. Keep moving up here. We have another clip here. See a little locking tab right here. You can pull that out. And then we push it up on the bracket. Then we can finish coming around the transmission. Now we have the O2 bracket. So the O2 doesn't need to be unplugged. It can stay with the engine or with the vehicle harness. I'm just gonna unbolt the little bracket here. And so this one's a 10 millimeter. The other two that I unbolted were 12 millimeters. Now we have all the wiring disconnected from the transmission. So now I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna take the two 12 millimeter bolts, and then there's a bracket, 14 millimeter. I'm gonna take off of the safe cylinder. The bolts are on, they come down from the top. So I'm gonna come down here. And I'm just using a wobbly 12 millimeter socket. So this is gonna have tension on it because of the fluid. This is always pushing out on the shift fork here. So when you take this off of here, this little rod is gonna push out a little bit. I don't know if you can tell it's moving out. It's pretty much maxed out now. But be careful this doesn't fall out and you start leaking fluid out of here. You gotta be careful with this. So put it off to the side where it's not gonna get damaged. There's a hard line on it here that feeds, because this is a hydraulic clutch. So this bracket here is the 14 millimeter that I'm gonna take off next. I'm gonna come up with my extension and my wobbly 14 millimeters I was using on drive lines. Get this bracket off of here, and this is also goes in the bell housing, so it needs to come off anyways. So now we'll get that bolt out, that it goes all the way through. It's a longer bolt, so it does go through the bell housing. So now I have flex on this line. So I have this clip here, the harness, vehicle harness clips in here too, and it's kind of holding me up for moving this where I want to be. So I'm gonna get my needle nose that I used a minute ago, squeeze that clip so I can get this harness out of my way. There we go. So now I have slack in the flex. We got our slave over here out of the way. So I got one more bracket here with our vehicle harness. So I'm just gonna take the 10 millimeter out that holds the bracket. The vehicle harness is off. See, it's all free. So now I want to work on the bell housing bolts. So normally this would have bolts that come from the front back. There's a spacer plate or a shim, whatever you want to call it, that goes around the whole bell housing in between, the bell housing and the engine. So these bolts here with nuts are aftermarket. This isn't correct. It's supposed to be like this one and this one, where it bolts from the front to the back. So hopefully your truck doesn't have this. Somebody else has been here before and it looks like they stripped this out and they put this bolt all the way through with a nut on it. But nevertheless, there's 4 of them that need to come out. So I'm gonna use a ratcheting wrench, a little stubby, because there's not much room in here to get the other 2 bolts out. I gotta use a longer wrench to break it loose first. Now I can come in here and the rest of the way out. Now I need to get this exhaust hanger bracket off of here. This bolt / nut is like 100% chance it's gonna break. If it does, you just put another bolt in there after the fact. But this pinches over this clamp, and if you don't take this loose, this bracket will be in the way from bringing the transmission back. So you have to take that out. So I'm gonna take these 217s out here. Ballast bolt's leaking coolant. It's a little odd. Gotta see where that water's coming from. So one of them just bolts to the bell housing. The other one bolts through the bell housing, which holds it to the engine. That's why you have 2 different lengths. So when you go back together, don't put the long one in the top there. You'll run out of, you'll bottom it out when it gets to here. I'm gonna try, come in here and see if this will break loose on me. Can't even get onto it. So there's a little cover here, a little rubber mat on the inner fender. I'm gonna pop the clip off so I can get a straight shot to that bracket here. And it's a 12mm. Didn't break or nothing. I'm gonna take that all the way out and put some anti-seize on it. So when I go back together, it's less likely the next go around that it has a problem. That thing is really hot. But now that I have this bracket loose, slide it down the exhaust and I can get this hanger out of here. So now I've got all the bolts and everything out from the bottom half of the bell housing. Now I wanna get the cross member out of the way. So because we're in the air, we have a rack. We need to use a tranny jack. So I'm gonna come up here with a tranny jack, support the tranny, lift it up so I can take the cross member out. So if this was on the ground and you're doing it on jack stands like we talked about at the beginning, you have jack stands here. Because of the transfer case, you can't really have a couple people do it. You still want to have a jack, but you probably want to have a couple people support it on the jack because of the transfer case. But you don't need to take the transfer case off in order to do this. But you could just support the tranny with a floor jack and then have a person on each side support the tranny so it doesn't twist on the jack and still do this on the ground. That's how you would do it on the ground. But because we're in the air, so we're going to use our tranny jack. Just gotta watch the sway bar. I'm not cramming it up against the cross member here. So once we get above the sway bar here, we can kind of move it forward a little bit. You kind of want to be closer to the back because of the transfer case. The front doesn't weigh anything with you know, once you pull it out of the clutch, the bell housing doesn't weigh nothing. So the back's gonna be heavier. So you want to be more towards the back of the transmission. So I'm going to use blocks of wood here on the side and have this lower spot kind of sit in the middle, and I'll adjust this once I get up there to kind of give it support. So now we got 4 12mm bolts in here that bolts to the cross member to the mount. And I like to jack it up a little bit. So now I know all the weight is off the cross member, and we have 2 14 bolts on both sides here. And I like to leave one bolt in this side so when I take this apart, it doesn't just swing down on me. Give it a little support, take that bolt out. Now the only thing that's holding it up here is the little hanger here for our exhaust. Got this little tool that'll come in here, pushes this out. There it goes.
So in the case you don't have the tool, what would you do?
You would come through here with a pry bar, and you could come like this to here, and you would pry it off with a pry bar. So now we're gonna pull our cross member down. You can have all kinds of dirt and rocks and stuff on here, so watch out it doesn't fall onto you. So same deal, set in the back here out of the way. So I just put this strap on here just to hold the tranny to the jack. You just want to make sure if you do use something like this, fill up here and make sure you're not grabbing the harness when you come around the top and that you're just holding to the tranny. So now that I have the cross member out of the way, I'm going to drop the transmission down here. I'm going to drop the whole assembly down to get to the upper bolts. The engine will support itself, but with the tranny and the transfer case on here, you can put extra load on it that doesn't need to have on there. You could hurt something. So just come down a little bit. So now that I gotta go all the way up top of the bell housing there on top of the tranny. I use this really long extension. And this is kind of a specialty deal because it's 1/2 inch drive on this side, but it's 1/2 inch the whole way, so it doesn't bounce when you're using the impact. But on this side, it goes down to 3/8, so you can use the smaller wobbly sockets that fit in the tighter areas. If you don't have something like this, you can do it with the extensions. It's gonna have a lot of flex, so you're gonna have to use a longer ratchet on here, and it's gonna take some leverage to get it to break loose. Because the more extensions you have in a row attached together, it's going to bounce if you're trying to use an impact, and it won't get the bolt broke loose. It'll just rattle in between all the connections. This is kind of nice if you plan on doing a lot of the trannies or fighting, dealing with the tools or what you have at the current time. We're going after 3 17mm bell housing bolts. We already got the one on the side here, so in total, there's 4 17mm. And if it doesn't come out with the socket, if you can't reach it, you can always use a magnet, but I can get my hand in here. This just has a bigger washer on it, the one that goes for the exhaust hanger bracket, but it's gonna be the same length. So just note that. The one with the bigger flat washer on it is for the exhaust bracket, and then all the other ones, the other three are gonna be the same as this one. Now I'm gonna come over to the other side over here, the other upper one on the driver's side here. So I'm gonna come up. See, that one came out with the socket, so that's kind of nice. It's kind of hiding here a little bit, right above the shift fork. We've got another 17 right here. You can see our train's kind of flexing. Seems like we're a little heavy on the back, so we're going to adjust our jack here to kind of put more load on the back of the tranny to hold up the weight. Okay, so I got one more to go. So if you remember earlier, we took this bolt out here, which holds the bracket here on the line for the slave cylinder. Okay, so this bolt goes through and holds the starter. So there's one more bolt right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's a 14 millimeter head. So it goes through and holds the starter also. So when you take that out, you don't want the starter to fall because we kind of cheated. We didn't disconnect the battery. For the most part, it'll just sit there. But the line here, the battery line on the side of the starter isn't exposed. So as long as it doesn't do anything crazy, it's not going to arc and have a fit. That's why we didn't disconnect the battery, because we're not dealing with that. You see it here if I come in and I'm gonna push that harness up, it's kind of hiding. So we're gonna come up right here, and that's the last bolt. So kind of wanna keep an eye on the tranny, maybe give it a little support, because it might move a little bit, because this is the last one holding it in. So just have a feel of the tranny. Okay, so nothing crazy is happening. My starter's starting to move, so I wanna come up here and just give my starter some support, make sure it's not gonna fall, do anything weird. Finish taking the bolt out, get the extension out of the way, nothing's happening. So the starter, see it's all loose now, make sure it's gonna stay there out of the way. I need to come up here, grab my bolt. So now it's double check. Looks like we got all the bolts out, our harness, everything is free. So now we should be ready to slide the tranny back. All right, so now there's a little handle here on the jack. So if you're at home using a floor jack, you'd wanna hold on to the handle of the jack. I wanna feel the transmission, make sure it's not doing anything crazy, because I'm gonna be looking up here. So I'm gonna kinda hold on to the transmission. I'm gonna start bringing it back now. So being that this is slipping, I know we're still kind of attached. So I'm gonna wiggle this, see what's going on. Get the brake loose, maybe I need to come a little lower. Might be stuck on the dowel pin, so I need to see here what's going on with it. Okay, it's starting to come now. It looks like it's stuck on the dowel pin. So that side started to come loose. So that front panel, here, let me pull it out here. I thought it went all the way around, but it didn't. I was thinking of a different one, so it comes off. I'm gonna wiggle it back here. It's trying to twist on me a little bit, so I'm gonna try to compensate for it. There it goes. Okay, now we're up against the firewall, so we need to come down as we come back. I want to check the harness, make sure everything's loose and free, nothing's tight and getting bound up. Come down now. Now that we're clear of the sway bar and everything in the front, see, you keep trying to grab as we come down with that convoluted over there and stuff. It'll snag on something and then it'll pull on it. Okay, now I'm going to drop it all the way down. It's going to kind of drop for a second and catch itself. Jeez. It's like the roller coaster, man. That first drop gets you. All right, so the tranny wasn't too stable on the jack, so we just set it on the floor, so I didn't have to worry about it trying to slide off or do anything crazy. Like I mentioned before, if you're pulling it out, try not to do it by yourself. On a floor jack, have a couple people, one on each side, maybe one holding the jack handle. But I just noticed as we got it on the floor here and got the tranny out, that this is supposed to have a plug in it, and you can see that it's been leaking for a while, so I'm gonna have to get that plug. All right, so now I'm gonna take the clutch off of here. We got 6 12 millimeter bolts, but now that this harness is kind of hanging in the way, I think I'm gonna unplug the O2 to get this off to the side here out of my way, and I'll tuck this over here. So I'll take the 6 bolts out. And try not to breathe this stuff in and get this clutch dust and stuff on your face. It's not the best of breathing materials. And these bolts are kind of a specialty bolt, so you want to keep them separate and just for the clutch. And when you get down to the last one, kind of got to hold it, but be careful because the clutch disc will fall. I normally put my thumb in here and hold the clutch disc and then grab the whole thing, but be careful. This is too heavy for you to hold. You could really hurt your finger. This isn't too heavy, so I come in here and hold the whole assembly, and I'll take the last bolt out. So there's dowel pins on here that hold this on, so it might be stuck on the dowel because this clutch has 0 pressure for engagement. So I might need to come in here with the screwdriver and pop it off, because normally the pressure of the disc will push against the clutch and bring it off, but this thing has nothing left. So you can see the dowel right here. This is a dowel pin I'm trying to get it off of. You can see I'm coming up. So we have, I think there's 3 dowel pins around the whole flywheel. So you gotta work it around. You see all the garbage falling out of here. Just this clutch is just done. Oh, I think I can. That's normally not this difficult, so I can tell you that. And you can see on this clutch here that it's just worn down. It is down to the rivets. The material is just gone. Let's see what the other side looks like here. Oh yeah, look at that. It is actually riding on the rivets, metal to metal. See how it's all cracked? If you look at the flywheel, you see it got really hot. Whole bunch of hot spots. It's got heat cracks in it. So we're gonna be replacing this flywheel. We're not even gonna try to get it turned. But if this wasn't too bad, you can normally resurface this and reuse the flywheel. But because of the shape of this one, the heat and everything that got to it, we're gonna replace this. So now I'm gonna unbolt the flywheel. So I'm gonna support the flywheel here. Put my arm on the bottom. Careful where you put your arm to support it, because if it's more than you can handle, it could hurt your arm. So just be careful with it. So it slides off. This is a good time to either check or replace your rear main seal. This vehicle has 215,000 miles on it. It doesn't look like it's leaking through the rear main, but it looks like there's a gasket here. It looks like it's actually leaking around the gasket or possibly the oil pan. So what I'll do is I'll get this gasket for this housing here, this rear main housing, and I'll get a rear main seal, and I'll replace the rear main seal and this gasket. But we are going to replace this pilot bearing, so now we're going to pull that out. So I'm going to use this little hand puller. It has these little jaws that go inside, and it's tapered here on the end, so when you tighten it up on here, and that taper comes to the jaws, and it expands the jaws so it's tight on the bearing there. So we're going to get our jaws in here in the center, and I like to bottom it out, and then I'll tighten it up and expand the jaws. Get it snug, and I'll pull it back, take the slop out of it. I'm gonna hold it here, but I don't wanna have my hand too far over, so when this comes down, I get a nasty pinch. So I gotta grab the end of it here just to hold it, so when this slides and it comes out, then it just doesn't go flying, that it actually catches it. So now that I have it snug down, my jaws didn't grab it, I didn't have it tight enough. Oh, there we go. I had to change the jaws. The other ones kept popping off, so these ones had a little more of a grabbing material, so we were able to get it. All right, so last thing we need to do on this, taking the clutch apart, is get the throwout bearing off the shift fork here. So it's just a little spring clip. You just slide the whole arm off. Then you see it just spring loaded on there. You can just get it over the little humps. Get the throwout bearing off of there. Thing that stands out to me right now though is this right here, which I just now noticed after we got it all apart. This is a little ball that's supposed to go up here that the shift fork pivots off of. So that's not good. We're gonna see about fixing that. I didn't notice that when we pulled it out. All right, so here we got all the old stuff and the new stuff. So we're gonna replace the flywheel because of this one got really hot and it's got heat cracks and just heat spots in it. We have our new clutch, our new pressure plate, because of the old one that we showed, we got grooves down to the rivets, all chewed up. We have our old pilot bearing, new pilot bearing. We have our throwout bearing and our new throwout bearing. And then what we just found on our pivot, well, this is a pivot ball for the clutch fork, I call it, actually called Toyota. They had a new one in stock, so we ran over and grabbed it so we could keep on.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, it's really very surprisingly. So we keep on rolling. Actually, it wasn't too bad. We're changing the rear main seal. This is the old one, a little beat up because we beat it out. And then this is a new one. So we took the rear main little cover off here and we cleaned it up, and then this is just silicone in here and then silicone on the bottom. We went a little heavy on the bottom here into the corner into the pan, but you just want a nice little push out of the silicone around it so you know you got a good sealing. So we have the new seal here. So it has a little spring in this particular seal. So I like to put a little trans gel in here just so when I'm tapping it in, normally have the problem with the factory seal. This is a factory Toyota, but an aftermarket seal, you can have a problem when you're hitting it, that it bounces and the seal can, or the spring can actually pop off, and then it's not going to seal. So just as a little safety precaution, I put a little trans gel around here to make sure the spring holds in place. Then I lube where it's going to ride on the crank. But on the outside here, I have it dry, just wiped, dry, clean. So when I put this on there, I want to make sure that this lip doesn't catch the crankshaft and roll over. So I'm going to push it on up and over to make sure that this lip doesn't roll over. We'll get it started in here and we'll push it up, kind of work it around and just keep an eye on that lip, kind of rotate it, get it to go on. It looks like we got it started good. Doesn't look like it's rolling at all, so I'm just going to tap it on. So I've gone around it and tapped the seal in even with the housing, but there's a radius on here. So the seal needs to go a little bit further in to actually have all contact with the housing to hold the seal in. So I need to come in a little bit from the cover, tap it a little bit more in, past that radius, so the seal is actually held in there nice and tightly. Now we're going to make sure our flange here is going to be wiped clean, no debris on here where the flywheel is going to sit. And these bolts go all the way through into the crankcase, so this could leak oil out of these bolts. So we're going to put a heavier dose of Loctite on the bolts, on the threads. So we verified there's no debris on the back side of the flywheel, all clean. Crankshaft's all clean. Our seal's in, everything's tight. Slide that on the lip of the crankshaft, and we'll rotate this to line up our bolts. I already put Loctite on the threads. I just used blue Loctite. So I'm just going to use a little ratchet, and I'm just going to run these down snug. And then these bolts get torqued to 65 foot-pounds. So when you go to torque this, the engine's gonna turn over. So you can see where I get on it, I go to go, it's just gonna turn over. So what I like to do is I just use one of the bell housing bolts. So I'll grab one of the bigger 17 millimeter headed bell housing bolts. I'm gonna put it in here. And that enables me to use a bigger screwdriver, flathead, put it up against the ring gear, and then it kind of sits against the frame over here. So once I get it pinched in, I think I need to get one of the bigger. I need one a little bit bigger. And I'm gonna do a circular motion because it's easier to get lost in which one you torqued if you go crisscross. So I like to go just circular. Then I know I have every one of them torqued now. So I'll just go all the way around. Jeez, I knew it. So now I did the pry bar, bigger pry bar. I got it up against the pinion here. So we're gonna start over again. Okay, so that must be the one we already started on. There we go. All right, so we made it all the way around. I like to go a couple extra. Make sure we got them all. So when you go to put the pilot bearing in there, you want to press or hit against the outside of it, not on the inside. You'll push the bearing apart. So I just use a socket and I put it so it matches up to the outside here, but it's a little bit smaller so it can actually go inside the crankshaft. Just make sure you're hitting it straight. And then you kind of want to go in. It has a radius, but there's a stop in the crankshaft. So I normally take it up to the stop in the crankshaft. So now we have our pilot bearing installed. We want to make sure that this surface here that the clutch is going to ride on is going to be clean of oils or anything. So we use some brake cleaner on the rag. Make sure we don't have any oil or any debris on here. This was sealed up, so there shouldn't be nothing on here. And then you got to keep an eye on the clutch disc. If it's not marked, flywheel side, you got to pay attention that most of the time there's a bulkier. See how this sticks out further than this side? Normally the flywheel side doesn't have room for that to ride. You can see that this is up against the bolts. It's not marked. The side that's more flush tends to go to the flywheel side. And then the part that sticks out goes to the pressure plate because the pressure plate has room. So the alignment tool comes with the kit normally. So you can put your clutch up here, use your alignment tool, hold the clutch in place for a second. And you can see how the pressure plate, what I'm talking about, has more of a relief, has more room for this part of the disc that sticks out. So same deal on this. We want to wipe this, make sure that it's clean. Take our rag, get a little more brake cleaner on it. Don't want any oil on here. And then these are going to have, so you have 3 dowels. It's going to have a bolt hole and a dowel. So you kind of got to move it around a little bit to line it up. And then see how this can fall down? It's got movement in here. So first we're just gonna put these all just so they touch. So it holds the pressure plate in place. Okay, so now I have all my bolts started. So now I'm gonna worry about the clutch here. So I'm gonna push it up and see how far I can go up, how far I can go down, kind of split the difference here. And this should just come out really easy. So I'm just gonna snug these down, kind of a crisscross. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go around and torque all the bolts on the pressure plate. I'm gonna torque them all to 18 foot-pounds. I did a lower number here to get it all even and close first before I do the final torque. Okay, now I'm gonna move it up to 18 to the final torque. Go around and check them one more time. Now our alignment tool comes right out. No effort at all. Got it nice and lined up. All right, so I got my bolt back out of the way, took that back out. And if you remember when I took the tranny off, remember I said it was getting stuck on the dowel pins? So here's a dowel pin here, and there's a dowel pin right here up top. And I like to put a little bit of anti-seize around these, just so in the future, for the next guy or me, whoever works on it, it's a little easier to come apart. And then make sure that where the tranny is gonna sit, there's no debris or anything crazy going on. So I'll wipe this down, and I'll just take a little anti-seize, and I'll just put it around the outside of this. So now we got the engine side here, all ready to go. So now we're going to go over to the transmission. So same thing on the transmission. I like to wipe off where it meets. I know this looks ugly and you feel like you want to clean it, but this isn't the best chemicals and air to be breathing. This could be a lot of dust. It's just better just to leave it, as hard as it is. But wipe off here where the throwout bearing rides. And then I already took out the pivot ball here, so we got our new one. Got some Loctite on it also. So we're going to put that back in there. And I'm just going to tighten it by hand. It came out pretty easily. So I'll go ahead and crank that down. It's good and tight there. And I'm going to wipe here where the throwout bearing rides. You can see that somebody put some sort of anti-seize or something on there already. And then with the ball here. So what we're gonna do is take the anti-seize and we're gonna put it on here. Quite a bit here on the ball where it pivots, because it's moving a lot on this point. So we'll get some on here. And then I like to put a little bit on here where the throwout bearing is gonna slide back and forth. So when it goes on there, that it has some lube. to slide easily on there. So we'll slide this back on here. So this is gonna go like so. You see it locks back in on the clips. And then you can see this is spring loaded, so it'll pop over that ball. So we can put it up into this rubber, little dust grommet, slide it on the input shaft. And then we're just gonna hold it here and push it back. You hear it click on. We're good there. And then we're gonna put a little bit of NICs here on the input shaft. We're just gonna go into the pilot bearing. So now we have our tranny prepped. Oh yeah, and then the plug on the transmission, when we took it apart that it was missing, they couldn't find it, but I took the risk of the same size as the fill plug on the transmission, and it was the same thread. So I used the fill plug. So we got that sealed up, so there's no more of this leak on the transmission now. We don't have an open hole anymore. I don't know what was going on with that. So the tranny is prepped, all ready to go back in, clutch is in. So now we're gonna get the jack, everything in situated, put the tranny back on it, and go back in with it. So as you can see from the time lapse, we put it all back together in reverse order underneath. After we're done underneath the vehicle, we lowered it down and we put the shifters back together. As you can see, we just tested it. Goes into first, goes into reverse, no problem. Everything looks great. We're gonna go take it out for a test drive, finish it up, come back for the next video.